Every morning at sunrise, Mr. Elric opened the shutters of his small art studio by the lake. Time had wrinkled his skin, thinned his hair, and slowed his steps, but his hands, though shaky, still held the grace of decades spent painting. He was once a renowned artist whose landscapes had hung in prestigious galleries. Critics praised his eye for detail, his sensitivity to color, his ability to make nature breathe on canvas. But after losing his wife, the muse behind his most heartfelt works, Elric stopped painting for years. The studio gathered dust. Brushes hardened. Canvases remained untouched. Yet every day, he still visited the studio, sat by the window, and stared at the water as if waiting for something. Then one spring morning, as the mist lifted from the lake, a single bird landed near his window. It stayed for a while, singing gently before flying away. That small, fleeting moment stirred something in Elric's chest, a memory, a warmth, a spark. He picked up a brush for the first time in a decade. Each day, he painted again. Slowly, steadily. Trees, reflections, birds in flight. The strokes were less precise, but filled with raw emotion. He didn't care for perfection, he painted for healing. After months of work, he completed his final painting. A quiet scene, the lake at dawn, a gentle breeze in the trees, and a lone bird perched on a window. It was simple, yet profound. That evening, he signed it, not with his name, but with her initials. Then he placed the canvas by the window and sat beside it, watching the sun dip below the horizon. Elric passed peacefully that night. When neighbors found the painting, they displayed it in the town gallery. Visitors said it felt like standing in a moment of pure stillness, where grief and beauty quietly met. In the corner of a quiet village, there was a small plot of land surrounded by stone walls. Years ago, a young man named Tomas bought the land with dreams of building a vibrant garden, one full of sunflowers, herbs, and winding paths of lavender. He worked tirelessly during weekends and evenings, clearing rocks, turning soil, planting seeds. The villagers watched with mild interest but didn't expect much. After all, gardens often failed in that rocky soil. But Tomas persisted. Rain or shine, he dug, watered, and studied plants by candlelight. He believed beauty could grow anywhere with enough patience. Tragically, a sudden illness took Tomas before the garden was finished. The land remained, half-tilled, half-blooming, an echo of a dream that never fully came to life. At first, villagers avoided it. It felt like a place paused in grief. But one day, a boy walked by and noticed small sprouts peeking through the soil. He brought water. A girl joined him, adding new seeds. An old man offered compost. Slowly, without a word, the village began to tend the garden Tomas left behind. Over time, it bloomed, not as he had planned, but in ways he never imagined. Wildflowers danced with vegetables. Bees hummed beside fruit trees. Children played among the rows. People gathered there for rest, conversation, and peace. The garden remained unfinished by design, new hands always adding, changing, growing. A sign was placed by the gate, Tomas's garden, proof that dreams planted in hope can outlive us. It reminded everyone that even incomplete efforts can inspire generations, and that the seeds we plant today may bloom in the hands of others. In a dusty attic of a quiet house lived a forgotten violin. Once the pride of its owner, a traveling musician, it now lay untouched, its strings silent, its wood dulled by time. Years earlier, the violin had sung through cities and countrysides, carried under the arm of a man named Elias. He played on street corners, in smoky taverns, and candlelit weddings. But after losing his hearing in a sudden accident, Elias stored the violin away and never returned to music. He couldn't hear it anymore, so he believed the music was gone. Elias aged. He walked slower, spoke less. His world grew quieter, but his memories of music remained vivid. He often dreamed of melodies he no longer heard, fingers twitching in sleep as if still performing invisible notes. One stormy evening, lightning cracked nearby, and a leak forced Elias to climb into the attic. As he placed a bucket beneath the dripping ceiling, his eyes met the old violin. Dusty, but whole. Almost instinctively, he picked it up. He couldn't hear the strings, but his fingers remembered. They moved across the fingerboard with the grace of long-practiced muscle memory. He played, not for an audience, not for applause, but for himself. Neighbors passing by paused at their windows. Though Elias couldn't hear the sound, they could. The music was fragile, wavering, but beautiful. From that night on, Elias played daily. Though he couldn't hear the notes, he could feel the vibrations, the rhythm in his chest, the warmth in his hands. He wasn't restoring music. He was restoring himself. The violin, once forgotten, sang again, not through ears, but through heart. On the edge of a seaside village stood a red letterbox no one used anymore. With digital messages replacing handwritten ones, the postman rarely stopped there. Yet every morning, someone slipped an envelope inside. No name. No stamp. Just simple letters, sealed and left behind. The postmaster, puzzled by the routine, began collecting them. Over time, he realized the letters were written to someone long gone, an old woman who had passed away years before. The writer poured out memories, regrets, gratitude, and reflections on life. There were no dramatic revelations, just thoughts on growing older, on missed chances, on learning patience and forgiveness. Some were just updates. The lavender is blooming early this year, or the sea was quiet today. The letters felt like a conversation across time. Eventually, others found out. Inspired, they began writing too. Letters to lost loved ones. To childhood selves. To unborn grandchildren. The red letterbox became a place of quiet expression. Though no reply ever came, the act of writing healed them. When the village decided to build a community park, they placed the letterbox at its center. It became a symbol, not of loss, but of connection, the kind that transcends time, distance, even death. Today, it stands not just as a mailbox, but as a vessel of memory. It reminds everyone who passes by that sometimes, what we write, what we feel, doesn't need to be answered. It just needs to be expressed. Hidden deep in the mountains of Nepal, an abandoned wooden cabin stood on a steep ridge. Inside, beneath a cracked window and dust-covered shelves, lay an old journal, its cover weathered, but its pages preserved. The journal belonged to a climber named Marin, who had spent years scaling peaks alone. She wasn't chasing fame or records. Instead, she sought quiet. Mountains, with their harsh winds and unyielding slopes, gave her the space she couldn't find in cities. Each entry in her journal recorded not just the altitude or the route, but her thoughts, struggles, and reflections. One page described a storm that pinned her to a ledge for 3 days. Another spoke of the silence so profound that she felt the beat of her own heart echo against the cliffs. Maren never reached the world's highest summits. She didn't need to. Her greatest challenge wasn't the ascent, it was facing her own doubts, fears, and loneliness. Climbing was how she processed the chaos within. She wrote about failure. About turning back just meters from a peak because instinct told her not to risk it. She wrote about discipline, humility, and the difference between bravery and recklessness. Years later, a young hiker found the cabin. Curious, she read the journal cover to cover. The words weren't about conquering mountains, they were about understanding one's place in the world. Inspired, she left a note of her own at the end of the journal. Your words climbed further than your feet ever did. Thank you. Now, other hikers add entries too. The cabin has become a sacred resting point for those not just climbing the mountain, but climbing within. Before dawn each day, a soft rhythm echoed from the corner of a quiet town, the steady, calming sound of dough being kneaded. It came from an old bakery owned by a man named Theo, whose hands had baked for over 4 decades. The bakery was small. No flashy signs. No modern machines. Just wooden counters, a brick oven, and warmth that reached beyond its walls. Theo had once dreamed of becoming a concert pianist. But life took a different turn. After his father's passing, he returned home to help his mother keep the bakery running. Music faded into the background. The piano in the back room grew dusty. But Theo never resented the change. He discovered music in other places, in the way ingredients blended, in the rise of the dough, in the crackle of a perfect crust. He moved with the rhythm of routine. He timed his day like a melody, each moment building to something warm, simple, complete. Regulars never asked about his past. They just knew his bread carried something more than flour and yeast. It carried care. One day, a storm cut power across the town. Shops closed. But Theo's bakery stayed lit, warmed by fire and the strength of habit. People gathered, seeking shelter and bread. He served them all, old customers, strangers, even stray animals seeking warmth. Later that night, a child wandered into the back room and found the old piano. She pressed a few keys. Theo smiled, walked over, and for the first time in years, sat down to play. No one said a word. The fire crackled. The piano sang. Bread cooled beside melodies long forgotten. It was in that moment everyone understood. Dreams don't die, they rise in different forms. Sometimes, in flour-covered hands. Sometimes, in music. Often, in both. In a small village nestled near a river, an old man named Hans spent his days crafting paper lanterns. His hands were weathered, but precise, folding, cutting, gluing. He didn't sell them anymore. He just made them, one by one, and hung them on the trees behind his cottage. Years ago, the village celebrated the Lantern Festival with joy. The skies would glow with floating colors, carrying wishes into the night. But over time, fewer people came. Technology and city lights dimmed the magic. Festivals turned into memories, and Han's craft was forgotten. Still, he continued. Each lantern he made held a memory, one for his late wife, one for his childhood friend, another for a promise he never fulfilled. The trees behind his home became a quiet forest of light. One day, a boy wandered by and watched silently as Han worked. Curious, the boy returned the next day, and the next. Eventually, Han handed him a piece of paper. No words. Just an invitation to learn. They worked side by side. The boy listened not to lectures, but to the quiet rhythm of creation. He learned patience from the folds, focus from the details, and peace in the silence. Months passed. The boy brought his friends. The grove of glowing lanterns expanded. The following year, during the Lantern Festival, people returned. Not because of flyers or social media, but because they remembered. And at the heart of it all stood Han, his hands still busy, his face lit by the glow of his own quiet legacy. On a flat stretch of desert, a man named Rafi ran every morning. There were no crowds, no medals, and no record keepers, just the wind, the rising sun, and his steady footsteps. Years earlier, Rafi had trained for a national marathon. But an injury just weeks before the race crushed that dream. Doctors told him he might never run again. But as time passed, the pain faded. Determined, he began to jog, just a few steps at first. Each day, a little farther. His body remembered. More importantly, his spirit refused to forget. Though he missed the competition, Rafi found something else on the open desert paths: freedom. He wasn't chasing time anymore. He was running for healing. For discipline. For the quiet clarity that came between breath and heartbeat. People began to notice. A young woman joined him. Then another man. Soon, there was a small group, each with their own reason: anxiety, grief, recovery, change. Rafi never led them. He just showed up. Every morning. Without fail. Years later, a reporter asked him why he still ran without a goal or destination. He smiled and said, "Because some journeys aren't meant to end. They're meant to keep us moving. No race. No finish line. Just motion and meaning."